Welcome to Back on the Broomstick,
a modern witch's spoken word grimoire,
where two witchy friends from way back are reconnecting to their pagan roots after a long period of mundanity.
We're rewalking the path of the wise and trying out all the latest spells, rituals, and magical theory in today's witchcraft and pagan practices.
So grab your wand and your incense,
your cauldron and your crystals,
and join us
as we get
Back on the Broomstick.
Hi, and welcome to Back on the Broomstick. I'm Layla, and this is part 2 of our 3-part spellcrafting series for a witchy Spellcraft Summer. Last week we talked about spell components and correspondences, and this episode is all about how to write your own spells that get results.
And I'm Chelle, and I'm just so excited to be able to be on step 2 where we kind of talk about the whole putting it all together, because I look at this as the fun part. This is like literally where you make the magic. No pun intended.
Yeah, it's literally a craft. This is the fun part.
I think that that's something we'll dive into too. It can be an actual craft. So I'm really excited to talk about spell crafting. Let's put it all together. We got our correspondences, we got our ingredients, we got our tools. Now what are we doing with them?
Now is the step where people tend to get very confused and they want to look up a spell on whatever, get love in their life, find a new job, get luck in their life, find a new romance. So what do you do next after you've found your ingredients that match your correspondences? How do you write a spell? What is a spell?
Well, I say this so much, I feel like a record. Intention. And I think a lot of people feel that when you write a spell, that it has to be some whimsical, rhyming, fantasized thing, when it can really just be like, bring love to me, bring me my desires, bring me what I'm looking for. This doesn't have to be stuff that rhymes. And I think that's where people initially get caught up. They feel like it has to be this like 10 paragraph long rhyming thing, and it doesn't.
A spell is essentially a structure, a scaffolding for you to raise your energy and direct it towards your intention. That's all it is.
Your intention's written down, kind of.
Yeah, it's a framework for your intention, for you to ask the universe or tell the universe, this is what I desire, and this is the energy I'm putting towards it. That's all it is. It's a framework. And the best way to start is, what is my intention? What do I want to get out of this? And that's the first place that you should start.
When I think of the money bowls, we've both been doing money bowls for quite some time. And, sometimes it's just a very simple, I would like to attract money to me. I would like to attract money to me. I would like to attract money to me. It's not even anything that has a lot of verbiage to it. It's all about the intent. And my intent is I would like to bring money to me. So that's kind of the mantra of my spell.
What you're talking about is a very simple bare bones spell. What is at the kernel of every spell is literally just a statement of intent.
Right.
I want a new job. I have a new job. That could be your whole spell right there.
But on the flip side, I think sometimes when things are more part of a ritual, something a little more formal, something a little more long-term, then you may want to take the time to maybe write out something. Still, doesn't necessarily have to be rhyming, but you may want to write out like a paragraph or two of a spell to kind of lay out long-term framework, long-term intentions. So I think really your goal or what you're doing the spell for is going to dictate how you want to put it together. Is this going to be just something short and sweet and simple and compact, or is this some grandiose long-term thing?
So let's start with your intention. Let's start at step 1, and that is defining what is this spell for. You need to know what that is. And I have 2 rules for your intention. When you write down the goal of your spell, number 1, don't be too vague.
Oh, geez, no. Yeah, don't be vague.
And number 2, don't be too specific. That's it. Those are my 2 rules for when you write down what you want out of this spell.
Well, there's a task.
Exactly. And the reason for that is because when you're asking the universe for something, when you're directing your will to something, you need to definitely have a goal. You can't be too vague. You can't say, I want success. Because the universe then has a very wide leeway to grant success to you.
You also can't say I need $999 either.
Exactly. So you can't be too broad and you can't be too specific. So you need to state realistic goals, realistically what you would like to have, and state it in a present intention. Words are very powerful. To your
Yep.
magical brain and to the universe, words have extreme power. What you state is reality. What you tell your subconscious is your reality. So when you state your intention, it really should be, I have the best job that suits my abilities, satisfies my life goals, and makes me feel fulfilled.
I agree 110% on all of that. But, in the same respect, you don't want to be specific with things, especially when it comes to romance and love. You don't want to be saying in a love spell, I want Joe Blow from down the street who works at the Quickie Mart third shift to be my next husband. You want to not be super specific because, Joe Blow down at the gas station might be an abusive drunk.
Plus, you don't want to infringe on other people's free will necessarily.
Exactly. You want to bring love that was meant for you, bring your perfect love to you, bring what
Right.
is meant to be into your life.
So you would state it as if you have it. You would say, I have a relationship that is strong and loving and fulfilling, and list the qualities in that relationship that you need in a relationship. Don't attach it to a person, but just state what you want out of a relationship.
I have a thing with how you're saying it. I sometimes have a hard time, and I'm sure other people do too, with the stating it like you already have it. I don't know why that comes hard for me. I don't know if it's a too humble thing, too presumptuous kind of thing. It's hard for me to word these things in a I already have it context. I always generally go more for the asking for it context. And, hey, I could be doing it all wrong and have been on these all this time, but I just have a hard time with the comfortability, is that a word? With being comfortable with speaking of it in the context of it having already happened.
And in spellcraft, you need to be comfortable with what you're saying. So obviously, you've been doing spellcraft for a very long time, and it's worked for you saying, I want this. I would like this to come to me. Please give me this.
Right.
For me, that feels too much like begging. So by stating what you have in present tense, not only do I feel that it makes the spell more powerful and more like I am in control of the energy, I also know that there is psychology behind stating your intention as if you already have it. The way that your subconscious works is very literal. And so I don't want my subconscious to always be asking. I want my subconscious to feel like it has it. And that gets into like manifestation principles as well and law of attraction, which I don't 100% agree with, but some of it works by putting out there that you already have this thing. Like you buy a blue car and now you see blue cars everywhere.
Oh, that
You know,
happens all the time. Yeah.
so when you tell your subconscious, when your subconscious feels like you have this thing, it's easier for it to draw it into your life. So if it works for you by asking, go with it. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the reason why a lot of people say state it as if you have it is to keep your magical brain engaged and working as if it has it. Because again, subconscious is like a toddler. Your magical brain is extremely literal.
Sometimes working with a Gemini mind is like swimming upriver.
The important part is what works, works.
Right. It's just, I don't know why, but I feel weird being presumptuous like that.
I'm okay. I'm going to skip ahead to the very end because this is a very similar thing. At the end of your spell, and we'll go over it again at the end, I promise. But at the end of your spell, a lot of people will say,
So mote it be?
yes, people will say, so mote it be. And that can feel really weird because it's very formal. So mote it be. Some people don't even know what that means.
See, now I don't feel that way with that. So I mean, I'm just weird.
And that's okay. Everybody's magical working is going to be very individual. But the
Yeah.
reason I'm saying this is because a lot of people feel very weird. They're like, oh, there's this weird so mote it be I have to say at the end. And really, it just mote is will. So will it be. You're basically just saying, this is what's going to happen.
Right.
So you don't have to say that. I do recommend that you say something, the same thing repeatedly because your subconscious, your magical brain is very literal. It's very toddler-like. It likes to know what to expect. And that gives it that repetition, that magical quality. So I do recommend you find a phrase that works to help you know when a spell is ended, but it doesn't have to be so mote it be if that feels weird to you.
Good. I'm not the only strange one out there. But to kind of go back to where we were, I do think that having some sort of something written down helps because especially for me when in the moment, I might have forgotten something awesome I should have said and I came up with something 20 minutes ago and it was great and now in the moment I forget it. So that's one reason why. But another reason why is sometimes I feel like if I personally write something down, that it almost gives it more validity. Maybe it's the kind of that thing in my brain where I don't like to say that I have it. I ask for it, but if I write it down, it feels like it's a permanent thing. Kind of like when people say something out loud, it makes it real
Yeah.
kind of thing. Same thing. If I write it down, it feels more concrete. But I also like to burn things in spells frequently. And, to be able to burn something, you have to actually have it written down.
I think that you should write it down. When you're making your plan for your spell, first step, define your goal. What do you want? What is your intention? And write that down. Then you should write down different items, deities, energies, the things that we talked about in the first episode of this series,
Your
your
correspondences.
correspondences. What items are you going to gather? It should be things that you have in stock. What do you have in your kitchen? What do you have in your altar? In your ritual cupboard?
One thing I like to do in this particular part of the process is, a lot of things have different correspondences, different significances. So I try to just focus on what does this particular thing mean to the spell I'm doing right now. Like I don't need to write down the 85 uses for bay leaves, just the one that's applicable right then and there to the spell I'm doing. So you're not getting overburdened with kind of all the extras and you're focused on your intent.
That is an excellent witchy tip. Good one. That's
Right?
a good one. Yeah.
Well, because you can get overburdened with some of the extras, because again, a lot of things have multiple correspondences, and you just want to stick to the nitty gritty. What's your focus? What's your immediate intent in the moment?
Yep. So take stock of what you've got and gather your ingredients. So now you have your intention and you have a bunch of spell components that match that intention. Your next thing, what kind of spell are you doing? Is this a one and done kind of spell? Is this a longer acting spell? Is this a spell that you'll need to do over multiple days or multiple times? What kind of spell are you doing? And that should match your purpose. If this is I'm going to put someone in the freezer spell, that's pretty much a one and done kind of thing. You
Right.
gather your ingredients, you do your spell, you put them in the freezer, you're done. Is this going to be a jar spell? A lot of people like to do the jar spells. I only think you should jar up your magic if it needs to be seen or carried or used as a token or a talisman in some way.
And then there's what I like to call as an altar spell. That is something that I do some sort of spell work and either have it on my altar or if it's something burnable, burn on my altar. I don't know. There's probably some book name for it, but I just call it an altar spell.
And this goes a lot back to like for like magic, sympathetic magic, and the doctrine of signatures that we talked about in the correspondences episode. Because the type of spell you choose should correspond
With
to
the
the
type of intention you have.
exactly. Freezer spells, quick, done, over with. But if you're doing something where you want to draw energies into your life, maybe you want to literally have a candle set on the far side of your altar. And every day at a certain time, you do a spell and you bring it one step closer and then
Right.
one step closer. And that represents drawing in that energy. So, what you do for your spell should match what your intention is, what you want to get out of it. Another way to look at it is representing the actions that you want to happen in the world by doing similar representative actions in your spell.
You also want to make sure that the type of spell you're intending to do, you have the adequate tools for. For example, if you're going to try to do a candle spell, you are going to need the candles that correspond, you're going to need a
Right?
candle for the candle spell.
If you're a frugal witch, you'll replace whatever you need with what you've got at home. Or
Exactly.
it's a great excuse to go shopping.
It is, but I think that I think you reminded me of something. You can also do a spell with as much as we talked a whole episode on correspondences. I do want to just make sure I interject that you can do a spell without any sort of anything. If
Right.
it comes down to it, just you and your finger, man, you and your finger.
All of this applies if you're not going to use any items at all. You're
Right.
still going to write your intent. You're still going to write your correspondences because, especially if you don't have spell components to help you raise that energy and get into that
You want to use
magical
the
space.
words to raise your energy.
Yeah, or you might want to call upon your ancestors or deities or land spirits or other energies that you work with to help bring that and to bring that energy into your space. So you can still do this without any items whatsoever.
So once you kind of figure out what type of spell, that's where you're really going to kind of get into the back into your ingredients, your correspondences. So, are you making an incense with the herbs you gathered? What are you doing with the stones? Are you meditating with them? Are you putting them on a crystal grid? You got to take the components that you got and figure out how is this weaving into my spell? If you've got a bunch of coins, how are you going to use those coins in your spell? So this is where, I kind of take stock of this is what I picked. This is my intent. How am I rolling this into one big happy fun ball? And that kind of makes my path forward, what I have, what my intention is, and how I'm going to utilize those things, whether they be stones or herbs or whatever.
And this gets back into the craft part of spell crafting. What makes you feel witchy and powerful? Do you like burning things like Chelle? Do you like candle magic? Do you like carving runes into candles or drawing sigils? Do you like chants? Do you like dancing? What makes you feel witchy? Incorporate that with your components into the framework of your spell. Make that part of the spell that you're doing. And again, make it match. If you're asking for something, you might want to put runes around a candle or write it on a bay leaf and burn it because that sends it to the universe.
Maybe you've got string and or yarn and you're braiding it to kind of weave intentions into your spell.
Right.
So you got to take your ingredients and figure out how am I utilizing these for my end goal. And it can be something fun like weaving cords, May crowns. These are
Right.
all their own types of spells, but are like fun crafts, so to say.
Right. And those, again, should fit with your intention. If you
Right.
want to draw something into you, maybe weaving a crown and thinking of pulling in that energy and holding it in that weave or those knots, that could be part of your spell. And it matches with what your intention is.
And, there's been times during certain magical workings where, because of the type of thing I was doing, I would either braid string, braid my hair, kind of tying those things together, making those binds. So anything goes, I think, is the best part of spell crafting. It's what do I have and what do I want to do with it? And, I don't want to say there's no rules, but there's no rules. I have six herbs, four stones, three coins, a half a candle. What am I doing with this? And I think
Right.
that's actually sometimes part of the fun of it.
Yes. And you can absolutely take parts of spells that you see on TikTok or you find on Reddit or Facebook or you've read in a book or you've heard someone else talk about. You can absolutely take those and modify that to fit in your spell.
But like we've said, several episodes in the past, do that, but tailor it to you and your situation and your spell. These exact words might have worked for someone else, but that doesn't mean those exact words are going to resonate with you and your spell and your ingredients and your workings. So take those things and then put your own personality and twist and magic into them.
So you've written all this down, what you're going to do, what you're going to do it with, and what the main part of your spell is going to be. Now, the next part that you need to decide is how are you going to raise energy to empower this spell? And we'll talk more specifics on raising energy, directing energy in the next episode. But just for now, know that that will be part of your spell framework is how do I now raise energy to empower the spell that I just did?
And I'm glad we're gonna actually spend a whole different episode on that because I think this is another piece of the puzzle that people find to be a little scary. The raising energy part, whether it's I don't know what to do, I don't know how to do it, I don't know if I'm doing it right. So I really think that that'll be a good one for folks to tune into because I think getting through the hurdle of your own mind of what you think is the hard parts and what you think are the scary parts, once you do it, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad.
For now, just understand that this is where that part comes in, and you can decide how you best like to raise energy. Do you like to chant? I know you mentioned, Shell, that you don't love rhymey chants, but I hate to say it, they're an amazing way to raise energy.
No, no, no. I like chants. I just don't like rhythmic reading.
There you go. Okay. Okay.
In my mind, that makes so much sense, by the way.
But rhyming chants, very simple rhyming chants, are very powerful to your subconscious mind and to your magical brain. For an example of that, just think of your favorite nursery rhyme. There is a reason why those stick with you your whole life.
Actually, I was just thinking about like 9 different chants that we knew back in the 1990s that all just flooded in my mind all at once right
Exactly.
now.
Yes. And repetition is a huge reason why these hold power. Again, your
Right.
magical brain loves repetition. So pick a type of raising energy that works for you. Maybe you like to chant. Maybe you like to drum. Maybe you like to have sex or an orgasm. Maybe you like to dance. Maybe you like to run around. Maybe you just gather the energy with your arms and your will and direct it. However you choose to do that, find one that works for you and then repeat it over and over again until it becomes second nature.
I just literally had the 12-year-old boy go right through my head. In, out, repeat if necessary.
There you go. So write that down on your framework, raising energy, and what your preferred method of raising that energy is. Then direct it. Again, however you choose to direct that energy, direct it out to the universe to enact your will.
To basically kind of put your spell in motion.
Exactly.
You gotta direct it out to the universe to put it in motion.
Right. If you don't empower your spell, all you've basically done is a kind of a nice little meditation for yourself.
I used to explain this to my kids that raising energy was like getting the rocket ready for liftoff, and then directing it was like it lifting off. And that is, I love to have my weird analogies, but that's a good one. You have to kind of build up all of that fuel to then rocket it off into the universe.
You can wrap that into other parts of the spell. The raising energy doesn't have to be separate from the crafting that you're doing. Maybe you could be doing your chant while you're putting all of your incense ingredients together and directing and raising the energy into those ingredients while you're asking them for their aid in your spell. They can all be happening at the same time if you choose, or they can all be separate parts.
I've done things before where I've made incense blends as a part of a spell, and kind of did I won't say it right now, but did a chant that we are both very familiar with while mixing it. Not while pouring it in, but while kind of, taking my little incense spoon and mixing it. And everybody has their own way, but again, as long as you're raising energy, whatever way works best for you is the right way.
Yep. And then the last thing that you should write down on your framework is how are you going to end your spell? How are you going to ground the energy that's left and come back to an equilibrium? And how are you going to close your spell? And this is back to that phrase. You can choose a phrase like, so mote it be, or you can choose, by my will is one that I like to say because it feels powerful.
Some people say, by the will of the universe,
Yeah.
whatever works for you, but you have to have like closing remarks, you
Yeah.
know?
You can just say the spell is over. But I like to have a formal phrase. It should be easy and it should be easy to remember because, again, the more you do it, the more second nature it becomes. And you'll be able to close out a spell and ground just by saying your phrase. It'll become that easy for you. Like Shell talks about sometimes raising energy, sometimes you can just do that. You can just feel that energy rush into you. It's because we've done it so often. I've raised energy for spells so many times that it's second nature now. You can just feel it, gather it, and know that it's ready to direct at a moment's notice. And it's because you do the same things over and over again.
Now, Layla, one of the things I remember the most about doing rituals and spell work with you camping So, guys, you want to know how Layla grounds during this stuff? She
Uh-oh.
literally will walk all over everywhere in her bare feet, rain,
Oh yeah,
shine, hot, cold. She don't care if she's walking in 8 inches of mud.
true.
That's always been your thing, stomping around in your bare feet. Where I'm
That
like,
is
ooh, my
very
toes are
true.
dirty. My toes are dirty.
Oh, says the girl with the sandals all the time, even in the snow.
Well, yeah. Or winter shoes if I have socks on.
There you go. That counts.
But yeah, just something simple but I had just had a feet thing. But with
You
you,
just
it
had
was
to call me out.
I
My
did,
hobbit
but it
feet.
was that whole you physically, your feet on the ground, like that
Yeah,
physical, literal grounding is what I always remember you doing, just stomping around in the grass.
it's
But
true.
it worked perfectly for you
Yeah.
without a lot of, for lack of a better phrase, pomp and circumstance. You didn't have to have this whole elaborate thing. You
hmm
just had to have feet on the ground.
Do you remember in our community, after a large ritual, what they would very often do? Okay, so in our old community, we had people that were brand new. We very often had people that was their very first time they had ever been to a ritual. And then we had people who had been it their whole entire lives, decades and decades and decades. So we
Yep.
had people on all
Whole
ends of,
gamut.
yeah.
Yep.
So things were kept pretty literal a lot of times in these rituals. And what I remember very clearly is at the end of every ritual, they would literally have people, after the cone of power was raised and the circle was released, people would literally drop to all fours or lay down on the ground. And we would talk about letting that energy ground literally into the earth, come back to an equilibrium.
That was like one of my favorite parts.
Yeah. And so you would literally act it out. You yourself would go down to the ground as you felt this energy release into the earth and come back to a nice balanced center. And it was just a very nice physical way.
Literal representation.
Yeah. And so you can do that. You can walk outside in your bare feet, go touch grass. It's good for you. Or you can do that in a representational way, whatever works for you. If you're envisioning a waterfall going down over you and down into the ground to bring you back to center, but whatever you need to do to, again, we'll talk about this more next episode, but whatever you need to do to release any excess energy and come back to a balanced equilibrium.
I'm dying to interject something, but I'm going to save it for next episode.
Okay, you guys are going to have to be in suspense till next week. So now you've got your framework, you've written it all down, hopefully in your book of shadows. Now it's time to actually do the spell.
This is the fun part.
When you begin your spell, I feel that it's best to start by creating sacred space in whatever way works for you. And this is also another part that I think should be ritualized, that should be the same as much as possible, so that your magical brain knows, oh, it's spell time, it's ritual time. It has that trigger like Pavlov's dog. You've trained your brain to know when it's time to do spell work. So it should always be the same.
My anal retentive self, back in the day, I never did spell work without casting a circle. I don't know why. I felt like I needed to.
That's what we were taught, that you
Yeah.
create sacred space. And to create that sacred space, wherever you are, you cast a circle.
I never did a spell without casting a circle. Whereas I wouldn't say that's necessarily the case now, but it is because I can do it so second nature and right off the cuff. And 30 years ago, I couldn't get into alpha in 1.2 seconds. Now I can, so I'm in a different place. I don't think either's right or wrong, but I do think that if you are newer, there's something to be said for doing that because it creates a framework. Like we always say, we have this Wiccan DNA. It creates this DNA within you that, down the line, you are in a space, in a place where you can do these things just in an instant, as second
Exactly.
nature.
Yes, you're training your brain to know when it's time to do magic, and that will allow you to get into that magical space faster and more powerfully every time. So set your space. Do you always do ritual in front of an altar? Do you always do it outdoors? But pick a space that makes you feel magical and set it up to be even more magical and even more focused on whatever your intent is. Change the colors, change the scents, like we said in the last episode from, Mr. Aleister Crowley, everything should put the magician's mind towards your intent.
Yep.
So
I mean,
set your
even
space.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've even totally rehauled a whole altar and started from scratch
Oh, yeah.
to have the altar match the spell.
Or set up a brand new altar in a different spot. Whatever works best. Like if you're going to be doing love magic, romance magic with your partner, maybe you want to go set up an altar on your bed or on your nightstand. That kind of thing. So
Right.
set your space wherever it happens to fit best for your spell.
But if space is lacking, use what you got. That's
Use
fine
what you
too.
got. Yeah, and if you're sitting on your couch, put some candles there. Maybe put a throw blanket or a pillow that are in the colors that match with your intent. You can still set your space even if you don't have a full-on witchy office. So after you've set your space, maybe you've cast your circle. Another thing we used to do that we don't do anymore so much is I really felt I needed a representation of every element. And I still kind of do that, but it's not as hard and fast as it used to be.
I still kind of do that too. Not gonna lie, that goes right back to the whole Wiccan DNA thing. But I'm not as freakish about what I have. Like if I don't have a feather in the east, like I'm not dying over it now, whereas I might have died over it a couple times in the past. But yeah, no, I'm totally with you on the elemental representation because when you're asking the universe, you're asking all the elements. I look at it. I look at the universe as made up of all these elements. I'm asking everybody. Let's bring them all to the party.
Our framework, our magical system tends to have Wiccan DNA. Your magical system might be very different. Maybe you're coming from a very Celtic framework or folk magic or root work or Greek or whatever your magical system is. It might look different. So, this is where you're going to set things up to match what your system looks like. How do you get into magical space? This is where you're going to start to do that. Set your magical space, however that works for you. And then you're going to introduce the idea of a spell. So now you're in your magical space and go down your list, state your intention. This is why I'm here. And start to ask your items or bring in your items to that spell in whatever way you've chosen. So now you bring these in and now you're saying your words and you're doing the actions that you've chosen in your framework.
You kind of make this quote unquote list prior, and now that you've got your list gathered, now you go and start doing the things. Are you burning herbs? Okay, now it's time to talk to the herbs, have a conversation about your intentions with them and then burn them. Or, are you doing it with a candle? Do you dress your candle with oil prior to lighting it? Or do you just light it? Do you carve in symbols? What are you doing with your candle? If you've got stones as a part of it, are you going to start laying out a crystal grid, or what are you doing with the stones? It's time to do that. So now is the time to act on all of the points on your list.
Most spells are based around sympathetic magic, just like correspondences are. The actions that you perform in your spell are a symbolic representation of what you want to happen in the world, what your intention is. So use your imagination and your intuition to create a spell that looks like what you want, a symbolic act. You want romance? Your spell could be you anointing yourself with sensual oils while chanting a love poem, and make beckoning gestures to call in a lover. You want prophetic dreams? Create a pillow. Get it? Sleep, dreams, pillows, huh? And fill it with dreaming and calming herbs. Do you see a pattern? Do you see where I'm going with this?
Yeah,
So your goal, your tools, your actions should all be alignment and everything should work together harmoniously.
harmoniously,
Yeah, like a recipe or a play. Everything
like a
should work
spell,
like a spell. All the
like a
parts should come
spell.
together and flow together nicely. And it's okay if you need to stop and look at your notes. It's okay if you need to grab a book.
I've literally done it with the notes right there before, and I'm not even
Exactly.
talking a long time ago either. Even recently, I've done it with the notes right there.
Do I like it better and do I feel more powerful and like the spell feels better if I'm able to kind of get into a flow and just let it work? Yes. But can I still make it work if I have to kind of stop that magical energy and look
Absolutely.
something up? Yes, absolutely. It still works.
So I feel like once you have done all of these things, like you said, it's kind of you're left with now what? You raise your energy, you ground your energy, then you kind of wrap it up with that so mote it be kind of goodbye thing,
Yeah, and thank the items that you asked in. Thank the items that you worked with. Thank the deities or energies that you brought
just
in.
like you would in Circle. Yeah.
Yeah, be a grateful witch. Let everybody know that good job, well done, everybody. Thanks, team. Wrap that up and then end your spell there. And again, repetition and doing these things in a way that is familiar can build that power and can make it so much easier for you to slip into magical space and do these spells.
And I think that that's where a lot of the meditative work comes into play. And, you know, Thor strike me down, the journaling comes into play. Maybe journaling's not the right word. Writing in your book of shadows, I love
There
that
you
so
go.
much more. One thing I do like is I like those spells that are like, like a 7-day spell or a 5-day spell, because I feel like that gives you time to create that repetitiveness. But when it comes to doing things over and over again, everybody wants to be that head witch in the forest that has been doing this for 100 years. You know what that hedge witch in the forest did? Practice, 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 practice. You may feel silly in the beginning until you realize that that practice is getting you somewhere.
Yeah, there's a reason why they call witchcraft a practice, and that's because you do an awful lot of it.
An awful lot of practicing.
That's right.
But I think that as long as you kind of gather what you feel you want and need, create your framework, follow your framework, raise the energy, send it out, ground afterwards, you can't go wrong, I don't think.
The basis of a lot of spells comes down to correspondences. How can you use your imagination to best represent with the items that you have the goal that you want to achieve?
But you use what you got.
You use what you have, and you can draw correspondences between pretty much anything. So, no matter what you have, you can find a correspondence probably that works for you. But that also works for the steps of your spell. The reason why that candle cord cutting spell is so popular is because somebody came up with the idea that two people cutting a cord and having the flames looks like two candles with a cord wrapped around it, you know? So
Yeah.
just come up with what you want to do and think of a way to represent that visually with the things that you have.
And, again, I want to just make sure we touch on the fact that if you have nothing, your spell can be equally as effective. Maybe all you have is you and your mind and your voice. You can call in the elements, call in deity, call in the elements of the powers of financial gain or the powers of love or the powers of peace and serenity, and use that to fuel the idea of your spell to then turn back to the universe. So as much as all the corresponding tools and stuff is all wonderful and pretty and smelly good, if you have nothing, you do always have your voice and your intention.
It's just kind of harder that way. The only thing that the things do for you is help get you into the magical space easier. They help you to raise the proper energy easier. They lend their energy to your working. So you don't need them. It just can make it a lot easier for you.
That's why I love stones, because I feel they emanate energy like so easily compared to other things.
Yeah, and that's another good point too that we didn't really touch on with correspondences and items is sometimes your magical tools will really start to have energies of their own.
I was almost going to say their own personality, but
Yeah,
kinda.
kinda, yeah. And so sometimes the items that you work with will start to have their own feelings and correspondences that might vary wildly from anything else that you know or understand. But that's a little different.
We'll have to chat on a different episode about how my malachite egg definitely has a mind of its own.
Yeah. And I had a tarot deck that hated me. Hated everyone, actually.
No, there was one person it liked. I remember you gave it to that person.
That's true. You're exactly right. I did. Oh, that's funny. That was when we were doing those tarot workshops at different
Yeah.
universities. Yeah. Or it was Witchcraft 101 and Tarot 101, I
I would
think.
actually love to track that person down and be like, do you still have that deck? Did it hate you too?
So, to the young person that went to Binghamton back in 1999-ish,
Ish.
that was given a tarot deck.
If you're listening, update us on the status of you and the deck's relationship. We need to know.
That would be really, really funny, and I doubt it would ever happen, but that would be really funny
I
if
would
it did.
shit if you got an email.
Send me a picture and I'll believe you. Anyway, all right. So, next episode, next week, we will be doing our third and final episode in this series on raising energy. How do you raise energy to power spells?
What's a cone of power? We're going to need to talk about this.
Yes, absolutely. So, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Back on the Broomstick. Please give us some likes, some stars, some reviews. It really helps the show out. It helps people find us, and it makes Chelle and I giggle like little witches.
Well, I think I need to go journal, Layla. I mean, write in my book of shadows to get ready for our next episode. So let's talk about raising energy, part 3. We'll see you there.
Be wise, be wicked.
And keep it witchy, folks.